I move that the Legislative Assembly recognize the urgent need for government to begin the work of creating genuine partnership and share decision-making with all Aboriginal communities on all issues that affect Aboriginal people. This work must be by providing supporting for the development of community groups that represent all clan groups and family groups within the community and have authority to make decisions of the people of the community in accordance with Aboriginal law. Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, rather, I have stood in this chamber for 9 years. I have watched minister after minister talk about wonderful things that they are doing and wonderful things that the government have done. Like this morning with the Chief Minister's ministerial statement. But when I stand in my electorate looking at our hopelessness, I do not see empowerment. It's always been still is. It's always been and still is, rather. I know that best for you, and that's always been saying. The best always, the comment from the governments have always been, we know that, sorry, say that again. We know what's best for you, Madam Speaker. I didn't want to be a part of a politician. I came here because elders and leaders were being ignored out there in the bush. Our rights were being trampled on. We were not recognized as having authority on our own country. So I came here to this parliament, to the Balanda system, and to see what was happening. I came here to fix the problems. I came here as a young leader to work with Balanda leaders, others, with respect and diplomacy. But what I have come to understand is that this parliament is about winning and losing instead of improving the territory to work together. And there are always losers in this system. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have watched my family members, my country members, and my constituents die early and avoidable deaths throughout this time that I have been in Parliament. And I am still watching how many people are dying today. In our small communities, we are seeing 3 funerals happening in sometimes there are 2 people from the same house. And when these funerals end, more begin at another camp, and they are continuous we are constantly burying our people. And since the intervention and now with this government, we have seen issues grow in our communities. Our young people have seen our elders being disrespected by the Balanda system, and they are now disrespecting elders too. But this government solution is to lock everyone up when we have been calling for community-led solutions so that we can address the underlying issues. But we have been ignored by locking everyone up and not listening to Aboriginal leaders. The government is causing great harm to our people. The Chief Minister has said today about the root cause of crime. But is she going to come and talk to us about these problems? Do we get a say in how to address the root crimes of system? Mr. Deputy Speaker, what I see in this chamber is a football game between two parties, and it is about trying to win the next election and the next at the next election rather. I am not here in Parliament to try and win the next election and a game. I am here to represent my constituents, and that is what we should all have been doing. This is what I have learned for the last 9 years. It doesn't matter who is the government. The outcome has been the same. There has been ongoing disempowerment of Aboriginal communities, but I have never been to see it as bad as it is right now. Today, the suffering of our communities is so great, and the response by the government is so poor. Our elders and leaders have been dismissed by this government. The breakdown of our Aboriginal authority by the Balanda system is cultural genocide. It is cultural genocide. It is killing our culture, and it is killing our people. The erosion of our culture is clear and evident rather. Our Christmas, we saw fighting in our communities that showed me that our culture is breaking down. Our community and local Aboriginal lawyers have, I'll say that again, our Aboriginal laws have been undermined and overridden by Balanda laws. But it is law that keeps our culture strong and maintains community harmony. So the ongoing ignorance of our law by the Balanda system is is created a chaos in our communities. When the intervention came in 2007 and pointed that finger at all adults and said we are all abusers, which is not true. It was an outright lie. And when the army came in and the bureaucrats came for our children, we came very fearful. When they took our jobs and ignored our training, we lost our ability to work for our people and be the primary people employed in our communities and running our communities. When the government policies and funding pushed everyone out of homelands and into hub towns, we lost the ability to live autonomously on country. We lost our connection to ceremony for our young people that keeps them strong and gives them self-discipline. In hub towns, we see an inability for many people to hunt rather. So they have turned to take away food that increases health issues we see every day, many times, and many people without traditional or volunteer jobs. We see adults and young people disengaged. Instead, there is gambling, alcohol, drugs, and we see significant mental and physical health problems. And no one in our communities is touched by these problems. Sorry, I'll repeat that again. And no one in these communities is untouched by these problems. Sorry. We are all struggling to survive. We are all struggling to create better, strong communities. But one thing that is clear to me is nothing that has happened in this chamber or in these Darwin government buildings. No policies, no laws have been truly about supporting and working with Aboriginal nations of the Northern Territory with equal decision-making status. I see some good people who want to achieve good outcomes, but there is nothing genuine in the system. Over Christmas, I have been working with very, very good police officers to manage the community disputes. I can do this because I have a government car. I have a office and staff who can support me. I can be a peacekeeper because I have resources. But we need more leaders in our communities to have resources so that we can work together with police on equal footing. We can work together I have called for resources for peacekeepers. I have called for the resources for programs for our young people on country. Our law and justice group in Ramangaling is the only group like it in my electorate. My thanks to the member for Goja that this group exists. But we need one in every community with a commitment to undergoing funding that creates certainty. Mr. Deputy Speaker, do the law and justice groups have funding beyond June this year? Do they even have adequate funding right now? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't want to hear two parties in this chamber blame each other for what hasn't happened. We can all look at the budget and see how little money has been put into resourcing, sharing, decision-making. I want to say, stop looking backwards and start looking forward. I have been sitting in the middle watching these parties blame each other for 9 years. But if we don't start working together on this today properly, more people are going to die. More elders and leaders are going to die. Our half will we save? How will we save our communities if we do not invest in shared decision making? We need to have genuine control over these things that are happening in our communities, on our country, and our people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, one example for this is the building of new houses on homelands. Hub towns are not safe places for everyone, and will someone new homes are needed in hub towns to address overcrowding. We must see more houses in our homelands that create safer places for our people. We are connected to country where we can hunt and perform ceremony for our children and for our young people. That teaches self-discipline and pride. We have the answers to have this, and we know what works. But governments are failing to properly engage with our communities and share decision-making power. They think they know what is best for us, and they are failing. They are failing in a way that causes widespread destruction and death. And this is what this motion is about today. There is no more time for excuses. There is no more time to pretend and lie and play games with our lives. We need genuine action, and I call on this Assembly to begin genuine action. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Aboriginal nations across the NT are different. We have different forms of governance, and this must be respected. The Yolngu clan based Yolngu, but not each clan of us are the same. Our clans do not operate by themselves. We are interconnected. We marry a person and of a clan, another clan. Our mothers come from another clan, and yet these people are all our family. We work together. We are from one clan, but interconnected into many clans, and Balanda systems have been pulling these harmonious systems apart. Systems that have existed for tens of thousands of years have been pulled apart since colonization. When the land council say land belongs to one of the clans and give a final decision-making power to one clan, they are pushing a Balanda system over to the top of us. For example, the future of the Gulf Peninsula must be determined by all clans and the Gulf Peninsula working together according to Yolngu Rome. And a true ownership of the Gulf Peninsula must be determined by all clans. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when this government locks up our people instead of working with us to fund programs on country, they are destroying our people and our future. What we need is to be able to create a governance body according to our governance systems, which represents all clans that have men and women present, and that have true power to make decisions for our people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I urge the Assembly to vote for this motion today, but more than that, I urge the government to take action with us today, not for us, but with us together in partnership. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Mulca. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Are there any speakers?
No, the member for Berkeley standing.
Sorry, I got in the script. Are there any speakers?
Yes.
Leader of the opposition, Leader of government business.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I really do want to thank the member for Mulca for bringing this motion to the Assembly this afternoon. It gives us a a good opportunity to look at some of the ways forward and to look at some of the things that, for whatever reason, have been scrapped over the years because, as I see, particularly in Aboriginal affairs, there's been a number of things over the years that have been put in place. They've worked, and for whatever reason, changes of government, changes of policy, changes of legislation have all impacted on Aboriginal people. Mr Deputy Speaker, as I travel across the breadth of our beautiful Northern Territory and engage with many people in the regions, communities and the very remote homelands, I'm constantly reminded why our government is pushing an agenda for real change in the bush. The Whanakiaro CLP government recognises that there is an increasing momentum across communities and Aboriginal organisations to participate in authentic shared decision-making, greater self-determination, culturally legitimate governance and improved accountability in local service delivery. Structural consolidation of local government brought in under Labor forced a one-size-fits-all system that in some areas has led to a weakened community voice, limited service responsiveness and a disconnect between governance and cultural authority. I have heard this message clearly during my travels. Many community members remember the days before super shires, when communities were thriving, proud and progressive. These were days when local jobs were plenty and communities had a means to have their voices heard, with cultural authority at the centre of true local decision-making. I know the member for Mulga is passionate about restoring cultural authority, progressing genuine partnerships with government to restore shared decision-making with Aboriginal communities on issues that affect Aboriginal people. The member for Mulga and I have discussed these matters on many occasions, particularly in relation to providing support to groups that represent all clan and family groups within a community and have authority to make decisions for the people of the community in accordance with Aboriginal law. Mr Deputy Speaker, our government policy is empowering the bush. Those reforms and the priority of restoring the economy is inclusive of supporting remote communities to strengthen self-determination through place-based governance models that reflect cultural authority, improve access to services and build local leadership. Our local government reform based around empowering the bush agenda is being pursued at a time where there is broad recognition that existing local structures in some regions of the Northern Territory are not delivering equitable outcomes for all communities, particularly remote Aboriginal communities. Our Empowering the Bush agenda will ensure that the voices of communities, traditional owners, local authorities, Aboriginal corporations and other regional stakeholders are embedded from the very outset. Engagement in community will re-examine the governance and structural foundations of local government and NT government's remote service delivery in the Northern Territory, without disrupting service continuity or undermining regional development objectives. Structural changes under this reform will only be progressed where they are requested by communities and supported by robust consultation processes. All governance arrangements must demonstrate financial sustainability to ensure long-term viability and service continuity. Over the past 12 months, I've consulted with a broad range of community representatives and organisations across the Territory. As a result of this consultation, I've received many expressions of interest from community leaders and organisations who want to be part of our Empowering the Bush agenda. I've tasked the Department of Housing, Local Government and Community Development to conduct structured consultation with those community leaders and organisations that have expressed an interest in participating. This will not be a one-size-fits-all approach. The establishment of community councils is not the only option on the table, and we will move at the pace of community to define the right arrangements in each place. Through health, Mr Deputy Speaker, we are working close with the Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations to empower remote communities with healthcare services, including the transfer of the Gumbalanya Health Centre to the Red Lily Health Board on the 1st of July. I am also pleased to advise that the NT Government has entered into a new Northern Territory Remote Aboriginal Investment Partnership Agreement, known as NTRI, which was signed by the Commonwealth Government and the NT Government and the Aboriginal peak organisations of the Northern Territory. The overarching objective of the agreement is to enable substantive and enduring opportunities for self-determination for remote Aboriginal communities to close the gap in life outcomes between those communities and other Australians. This includes contributing to measurable progress towards the socio-economic targets. Over 3/4 of the NT's Aboriginal population live in either remote or very remote areas. Their ability to access services which meet the diverse needs and are culturally responsive requires significant additional investment across regional and remote Northern Territory. Under the agreement, the Commonwealth Government has committed $842.6 million over 6 years, from 25-26 right through to 2030-2031, to strengthen the delivery of critical services for Aboriginal people in remote communities. The NT Government is currently working with the agreement partners to determine the specific details of the program deliverables that will build on the principles for investment and the 4 foundational pillars, which include being place-based, transition to community control, building local workforce and capital investment. For too long, the former Labor government pushed an agenda of local decision-making, hitting the media release quota, but very little else. As I've said previously, we will honour the 20 existing local decision-making agreements with community organisations across the Territory in their varying stages of implementation. In addition, our Empowering the Bush reforms will enable communities and Aboriginal organisations to participate in authentic, shared decision-making, greater self-determination, culturally legitimate governance and improved accountability in local service delivery, aligning with government priorities to reduce crime, rebuild the economy and restore our Territory lifestyle. Mr Deputy Speaker, as I said, there's been a long history of failures when it comes to working with Aboriginal communities over many years. Back in 1995, Mr Deputy Speaker, the government of the day, which was the CLP government, established a law and justice strategy back in 1995. It was discussed and looked at as part of the Little Children Are Sacred report back in 2007. I think the sad part about it was that the actual law and justice strategy was discontinued in 2005 by the Labor government. It was the inquiry identified that it was a sore point for many people at the relevant communities when the inquiry visited. Many people were actually confused as to why the government had stopped what was a very successful Aboriginal law and justice program, which covered Ali Kurung, Yundamu and Larjamanu. The inquiry was told that the Aboriginal law and justice strategy established men's and women's night patrols, safe houses, dispute resolution practices, role and peer modelling programs, diversionary programs and protocol agreements between the relevant communities and government and non-government agencies and organisations. Research into Aboriginal views and understandings and perspectives of government structures, policies and actions provided vital information for the government to recognise areas that needed to be addressed. And I will say that I was fortunate to be in Ali Kurung in 1995, working with Eileen Cummings to establish the very first safe house that came out of that law and justice strategy. Mr Deputy Speaker, the inquiry found it very difficult to ascertain precisely why the Aboriginal law and justice strategy had ceased. Of particular concern to the inquiry was it appeared to have ceased without any notice, any independent evaluation of its success or otherwise, or any consultation with the communities concerned. Whatever the reason, the result has been further disempowerment and disillusionment, I should say, for those communities. Mr Deputy Speaker, the overwhelming weight of evidence in the 2007 report said that Aboriginal law and justice strategy was working well, it was embraced by the community, was on target to deliver many positive outcomes and was wanted in many other communities. So it's still baffling why the Labor government at the time scrapped law and justice after it had been working for 10 years, 1995 to 2005, scrapped without any reason, scrapped without any consultation with Aboriginal people. So when you look at that and take into account that the latest Aboriginal law and justice, or the Aboriginal Justice Agreement was established in 2021, which part of the priorities in there was to establish law and justice committees in communities. So 16 years after law and justice committees were scrapped in communities, the Aboriginal Justice Agreement recommended that law and justice committees finally be established back in communities. So it's very concerning that the Labor government set Aboriginal communities back 16 years of failing to deliver Aboriginal law and justice groups in those communities. So 16 years of disempowerment, loss of leadership, loss of purpose has certainly had a massive impact on the communities. I spoke about regional councils, and it's important that we look at the history because history will help us to guide what we do in the future. In 2008, on the 1st of July 2008, the Labor government scrapped community government councils. What they did do was establish regional shires. I think they called them shire councils back on the 1st of July 2008. But what it actually did, Mr Deputy Speaker, by scrapping all of those community government councils in those communities, people say, oh, well, you know, it scrapped councils. It was just the council, it's gone and we've replaced it. But what it actually did, and I've discussed this with a member for Mulca before, what it actually took away was an established leadership group in every community. An elected leadership group in every community was told, your services are no longer required in your community because we're going to establish super shires. And of course, what we saw when super shires were established is that around that same time, the old CDP program was scrapped as well. We saw many services, plant and equipment centralised into the larger centres, taken out of the communities. The services that were delivered by the communities back then included looking after roads, doing the municipal work, looking after housing repairs and maintenance, tenancy work, all of those key areas that created jobs, it created participation, and it created opportunities for young people in those communities. What we've seen since 2008, as I've said many times before, is many of those services have been centralised into larger centres such as Alice Springs, Tennant Creek, Katherine, Darwin, but they're the services that used to be delivered by people living in those communities. That's when there was participation, that's when there was jobs, and that's when there was leadership in communities. That's had the biggest impact on communities here in the Northern Territory, and that's why we find ourselves in the very position we find ourselves today. Of course, there was the intervention in 2007. We've heard about the intervention. We know that communities were occupied by public servants, and we know the defence went to some of those communities. What we do know is that the Stronger Futures legislation compounded the issues in 2012. The 2012 Stronger Futures legislation was introduced by a politician called Jenny Macklin. Jenny Macklin, another Labor politician, introduced Stronger Futures back in 2012, and of course we know the history of that because it sunsetted in 2022, and we know the disaster when the Labor government let it lapse without having proper liquor laws in place. We know the chaos, we know the number of women that were affected, we know that Labor continually called this racist legislation, even though Labor were the ones that put it in place. So it's absolutely critical that we get back to basics. We start working with communities, we start working with leaders in those communities, because there's been some movement forward when we talk about shared decision making. Yes, there are some agreements in place. I've spoken about the NT-RI agreement, 842 million. That's going to provide opportunities to restore some of these services in remote areas. We know about the $4 billion housing agreement, the $4 billion housing agreement to build 2,700 houses over the next 10 years. And I must say that we are on track when it comes to building those homes. But the reality is that's an example of shared decision making. The Joint Steering Committee is made up of Northern Territory Government, the Federal Government, all of the land councils, and of course Aboriginal Housing NT. So that's a very good example of shared decision making when it comes to delivering remote housing in the Northern Territory. As I said, we are working with the Aboriginal controlled health sector to transition more health clinics into the Aboriginal controlled sector. The other point that I really wanted to make was that yes, we do have established law and justice committees in place at the moment. They're currently operating. We know that the law was changed 1 year or 2 years ago so that those law and justice committees would have a specific function in their community to provide an Aboriginal experience report to assist the community courts to make decisions when it comes to sentencing. So that's a good example of shared decision making. Madam Speaker, when it comes to our policy around empowering the bush, this is a significant change, and I do want to briefly touch on the Groot archipelago, where a breakaway council from the East Arnhem Council has been established. And I must say that, and I recognise that Labor did do some work on that, and I think the member for Gwaja might have been involved, but the problem was that when we came into government, we found that they hadn't even done that properly. And what the community wanted to see was some wards over on Groot Island. So what we did was immediately suspend or defer the election so that we could actually have those conversations with the community and participate in that shared decision making. We listened to the people on Groot, and that's why there was some wards established on Groot. Is there more work to do? Of course there is. I've already said that our election commitment is to empower communities. What I do want to say is that we've got people on the ground at the moment consulting with those communities. I mentioned that I've received a number of representations from different communities that want to look after their communities. They want to have leadership established in their communities to make decisions on behalf of the community when it comes to service delivery, seeking funding, and how those services will be delivered. So we're out there now consulting and engaging with communities. There's some good examples of communities that have been doing this for a while. I always talk about Canteen Creek in my electorate, and I went to their 40-year celebration about 18 months ago, which was a celebration that they had established their community from the ground up and continue to operate under the Oratilla Aboriginal Corporation today. 40 years of running their community. So the naysayers that are out there that's saying, well, it can never be done, we can't go back to small communities. My advice is get out there, talk to the people on the ground, because what they're telling me is that they want to see the structures brought back to their community, whether that's a local government council, whether it's an Aboriginal corporation delivering services like they do in Canteen Creek. But what these communities want is to have that leadership structure that was taken away in 2008. Yes, we can sit around, we can talk about councils. The critical thing is that it took away a leadership structure. It took away the pathway for young people to even aspire to have a leadership position in their community. That's what it did back in 2008. What we need to do is work with the community, build up those structures again, create opportunities for people living in those communities, create pathways for young people that want to aspire to a leadership position in their community. Community government councils can deliver a whole range of services. Why can't they look after housing in their community? Why are these tenders out there and have been out there for a number of years? Big, broad tenders where somebody in a larger centre might be driving in and driving out. Why can't these communities, why can't we work with the communities and build up the capacity and capability for communities to create jobs, look after housing, look after the tenancy, look after the repairs and maintenance, look after the roads, take on all of those municipal jobs, look after sports and rec, safe houses and night patrol? There's plenty of capacity out there. And that's why we're working with communities to create those opportunities that were taken away back in 2008. That's what our policy is all about. We know that those community structures, we know that there's a whole range of different community structures in communities. Some are uncoordinated. We know that there's housing reference groups. We hear about community safety groups. We hear about someone managing the alcohol management plan. What we do know in some of these communities is that a local elected leadership group can take control of these very issues. They can take control of law and justice issues. They can work with the community. But what we need to do is bring back those opportunities for Aboriginal people living in remote communities. The opportunities that were taken away by the Labor government in 2008. So, Member for Mulga, the conversations that we've had, we've got people out on the ground now having those conversations. What we want to do is ensure that Aboriginal people are empowered to not only take control of their community, but to take control of services in their community, because we want to see people in jobs. We want to see people going to school. We want to see people having those leadership opportunities that have been taken away and have been missing for so long. That's what our policy is all about. So there are some examples of some shared decision making. The housing agreement, $4 billion over 10 years, but not much of that involves the people on the ground in communities. There are opportunities to strengthen the involvement with people in the communities. We know that there's bits and pieces of money for homelands, but we know that some of those larger communities, they want to look after the homelands that are nearby. They want to look after the homelands that are nearby, but what we've seen, as I said in regard to many of the big contracts, a lot of those contracts are now being delivered from larger centres in the Northern Territory. We need to get back to basics. We need to ensure that we're building capacity and capability and working directly, hand in hand, with Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory. That's my vision for the Northern Territory. The opportunities are there. We need to get out and do the work and engage with Aboriginal people to ensure that those opportunities are realised. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Gwadja.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, can you just pause, please? Up in the gallery this evening we had Reverend Viliani Myler from the Casuarina Uniting Church. Welcome to Parliament. Member for Gwadja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do rise this evening to speak to the motion brought forward by the member for Mulga. It is an extremely important motion, and I absolutely agree with the sentiments that are brought forward by the member for Mulca. And I think, Madam Speaker, it is an important reminder for every single one of us in this parliament to cut the shit. Stop actually making up excuses for what did or didn't happen. Madam Speaker, it's not actually out of order. Madam Speaker.
Please just pause. Point of order, member for Blaine.
Standing Order 31, he said, I won't repeat it.
Shit.
Yes, that word.
Look, I'll let it go through to the keeper. I think in conventional society that is a word that a lot of people use as desirable or as undesirable as it is. Please continue, member for Guyula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm not attributing that word to any individual. What I'm saying is we do need to cut the shit, and we do need to stop coming in here and making up excuses for why any of us didn't do anything. We've just heard a speech being delivered in here about why. The government have been in for 528 days. We should be seeing action in the bush like they promised. Now, I want to make it really clear. Both parties, as the member for Mulca has rightly pointed out, both parties committed to 20 law and justice groups by 2027. Labor only got to 5 of those before the election. The Northern Territory's Attorney-General has said for 528 days it's under review. That is the long bloody review, Madam Speaker. 528 days, and she still cannot tell us where the next round of law and justice groups are going to be. It's not good enough. Both major parties absolutely need to do better, but let's absolutely just acknowledge for a moment those 5 law and justice groups across the Northern Territory and the work that they have been doing across the place. Groote Island, Maningrida, Ramingining, Barunga, Kintor and Yuendamu had a law and justice group that was ready to be signed off, but it appears that it is not ready because this government doesn't think it's ready. Now, Madam Speaker, making sure that we elevate the voices of Aboriginal Territorians is absolutely crucial. If we want change, we have to drive that change. We need to make sure that people are involved in that change. Self-determination, Madam Speaker, should not ever be seen as a policy. It's not a policy. It is an absolute core essential to the fundamental well-being of Aboriginal people right here in the Northern Territory. We need to see more people absolutely respecting that level of self-determination so that we can see a better, brighter future for all Territorians. Madam Speaker, we do not want to see decisions being made without the community. No more decisions being made about us without us. We want bush parliaments, Madam Speaker. That's how you change this place. Bush parliaments, making sure that people in their local communities can actually be recognised, be elected, be the local politician of their community, so that that community has a front door. It has its own assembly. When governments go to those communities, they're not just picking and choosing who they meet with, when they meet with. They have to rock up to that bush parliament, that regional assembly, and they have to say to them, what's going on? What are we here for? Housing reference group decisions, health decisions, education decisions, environmental decisions, decisions about any policy. That's what needs to happen. We need bush parliaments, Madam Speaker. The member for Mulca has spoken about a lot of important decision-making abilities, and I want to absolutely echo what I said last night in this parliament. One of the greatest bodies that we had as blackfellas in this country was ATSIC. But it was played politics by a bunch of white fellas who said that it was corrupt. And rather than addressing those allegations and areas, they completely shut down an entire tier of governance and self-determination for Aboriginal people, gone, and that has had significant and lasting impacts. Now, let's just make it really clear. We have heard in here from the member for Barkly about Stronger Futures legislation. Again, I'll say it, I've said it before, that is shit legislation. The Northern Territory intervention was shit legislation. Mal Brough, very ordinary minister. Jenny Macklin, probably the same. Nothing came out of the Northern Territory intervention that was led by John Howard that actually delivered anything substantial for remote Aboriginal Territorians other than trauma, dispossession and heartbreak. And we absolutely cannot come in here under any illusion that it was the best thing that ever happened, because it is not. Yes, there are aspects of certain policy settings that have been brought in that have addressed areas of need or concern, but they didn't need to come in under the Northern Territory intervention here in the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker. So let's just get that on the record. Let's just be clear what that means. I really want to make sure, Madam Speaker, that we do hear from the Northern Territory Attorney-General, because we are supposed to have 20 law and justice groups by 2027. We are in 2026 right now. Where are those law and justice groups? I have been out with the member for Mulka when he absolutely championed Ramingining. I went out with him, met with him, spoke with the elders, local people wanting to be involved in driving those local decisions, and they are the best decisions because they are decisions from the ground up. They are decisions that have been driven by lived experience. And that's why we did the legislation to create community courts, Madam Speaker, and have the law and justice groups so that Aboriginal people could sit with the judge at the time of the courts to give them advice, to give them feedback, to provide an Aboriginal experience report so that at the time of sentencing, the judge could absolutely take into account what that community thought was an appropriate measure of sentence and what could be done and what was going to be done anyway. Because let us be known that, yes, we work in this world right now and it is a very white world for Aboriginal people, but outside of here, the customs and the cultures and the traditions are absolutely strong, they're important, and they need to continue to thrive and survive, Madam Speaker. But they need to also be recognised by places like this that recognise that there are cultural obligations, that there are ceremonial practices, and that they are rightly supported to occur, Madam Speaker. That is what we need to be doing. That is absolutely what we need to be supporting. The Minister spoke in response to the member for Mulka and spoke about housing. Yes, we already know this. Aboriginal people should be involved in housing decisions. And yes, the Northern Territory government has at times tried to do that. Have they done it well? No. Has any government in the Northern Territory got it right? No. So we should be working with some of that bloody good housing mob across the Northern Territory. Willa Junta in Tennant Creek, Jimmy and Norman Frank leading an amazing housing project. They have designed their own house. They have funded their own house, and they have had that house built in Tennant Creek. Aboriginal people leading, growing and showing. Amazing. That is something that everyone should be celebrating tonight. That's what we need more of. We need the Territory Government and the Commonwealth Government to say, yes, let's involve Aboriginal people more in the housing designs so that we can get a better quality of house in the bush that's going to be looked after, that's going to be cared for, and that is culturally appropriate and considerate of the weather conditions. We are coming out of some of the hottest summers that the Territory has ever experienced. We need our homes to be more energy efficient and more practical, Madam Speaker. Rangers. Rather than cutting funding to rangers, we need to be giving more funding to rangers because they care for country, they care for culture, and they provide economic opportunities that lift my mob out of poverty in the bush. These are all important things. Rangers are amazing. They have the local knowledge handed down for thousands of years and generations. They know how to read country. When people get lost, who do you call? You usually call a ranger in a community, and they help. These are the things, Madam Speaker: ranger funding, housing, law and justice groups, health groups. These are the things that we can do. But if we actually look at doing it and bringing people together, we can do it really well. The Minister for Local Government keeps talking about local government reform, breaking away councils, smaller councils, doing this and doing that. I want to see what he's doing. 528 days later, we don't even have a single draft of what it's going to look like, where it's going to be and how much it's going to cost, because it's going to cost Territory taxpayers more money to do this, but I'm open to it. Show me the money and show me the plan, and I'll gladly support you where I can. But at the moment, 528 days later, we still don't see anything. Now, Madam Speaker, what we do need is absolutely, as I've said, no more decisions about us without us. We need bush parliaments. This is an opportunity to create a front door for our remote communities, a chance for people to come together work together and move forward together. That's absolutely important. I can understand the frustrations of the member for Mulka, as I could rightly understand the frustrations of the member for Barkly when he was on this side of the chamber. Being a Bush member is hard, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend that it's party-driven. Anyone who's a Bush member works twice as hard as any other member in this parliament, because every other member of this parliament usually gets to go home to their own electorate each and every night. As a Bush member, you represent a huge district. You have to stand up and man up for everyone in your community, and that's hard work. And I want to acknowledge that the member for Mulka, Barkly, Daly, Arnhem, Arafura, all do an incredible job. Everyone, and Namatjira to some degree, it is a remote seat. We need to make sure that we recognise and elevate the voices of our remote communities. We cannot continue to go down a pathway where they are ignored. And that means action. We absolutely, Madam Speaker, have to do that job. And as the member for Mulka was rightly pointing out this evening, too long decisions have been made about Aboriginal people without Aboriginal people. The policies have been designed in offices far from the decisions. Decisions that are made in the cabinet room up here, or decisions that are made across the road here on Mitchell Street or Wood Street or Kavanagh Street, often those people don't understand the lived experience of what is going on in the bush. And I want to make the point of being really clear tonight. I'm not going to try and be positive here, but I want to absolutely say there's probably one member of the government that absolutely works their guts out, and that is the member for Barkly, because he does travel. I might rubbish him, but I do see him out and about doing the hard work, trying his best with the cabinet that he's got. But what I do want to highlight is we have the member for Sanderson, the Arts Minister, right? You want to value Aboriginal people. This is an Arts Minister who hasn't driven on a single dirt road himself. He charters in on a big jet and visits 1 or 2 art centres. That's not living. Get out on the dirt road. Experience dirt roads that Aboriginal people have to drive on every day. That industry, our beef roads, our mining roads. You talk about caring about business and economic opportunities for Aboriginal Territorians, then upgrade the infrastructure that is required to make business eligible. Like I said, we've got an Arts Minister who's struggling to push himself to go out to remote communities. Minister, don't be scared of black people. They're not scary. They're some of the most amazing Territorians you will ever come across. Get out into those remote communities. Get out to the Western Desert. Get out to Barkly. Experience how amazing the art centres are. Don't just fly in. You've got the Attorney General for the Northern Territory. Absolutely been to Groot Island and Yirrkala. How many other law and justice groups has the Attorney General bothered to meet out in a remote community? Very few. How many dirt roads has the Attorney General herself experienced? Very few. 528 days or thereabouts they have been in government, and they haven't been out to half the territory. Govern for all the territory. Stop governing for a small group. You were elected to represent all Territorians, and you need to start acting like you're governing for all Territorians. Because at the moment, the only place you go that's not in the city is the fringes of the cities and the towns. Get out in the regions and meet with people. I will absolutely gladly take you out to places in the Northern Territory that are some of the most remote places in the Territory for you to see and hear and experience firsthand the challenges that many people in our remote regions face every day. Now, we do need to all do better when it comes to elevating voices of Aboriginal people. And I want to make it clear, I absolutely think that it is an absolute shame that the voice to Parliament didn't get up, because this is a government who laugh about that voice not getting up. But when you break down the numbers and you look at the Northern Territory, every Aboriginal community in the Northern Territory voted for the voice because they voted for change. They voted to be empowered. And we need to honour and we need to respect that, and we need to do everything in our power to make sure that we provide better governance structures for their voices to be heard, to be respected, and to show us the way. When you go out to parts across the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker, I went out to Wallara, my community, great community, love that community. Has that community had some unrest? Absolutely. But did that community fix that? Absolutely. Peacekeeping, mediating. They led the charge. They came together the true Walpurgis way. We brought everyone together. There was lots of conversations. It was animated. It was hot. There was heated words right to the brink, and then they pull it back, and then they unpack it, and they work together, and they mediate. And I want to give a shout out to all of my deadly Aboriginal community police officers and ALOs who were there working with Southern Tanami Kudjati Group, doing the hard work. They're leading the charge because they know they're connected to everyone in that community. They've got kinship relationships with everyone in that community. They know how to drive the right pathways to get the right responses. And they were supported through Southern Tanami Kudjati to do that work. Now, I will acknowledge, of course, that work is possible because the leadership groups come together. They are often given funding from the Commonwealth and the Territory Government, but we need more of that funding rolled out across the Territory so that we can do peacekeeping and mediating in all of the Northern Territory's communities. Shouldn't be left up to the Community Justice Centre to do it in isolation. Law and justice groups across all of the Northern Territory help us mediate. They help us peacekeep. They help us keep our communities safe, secure, and they keep the balance of harmony in our communities. We can do that. We can cut down on half of the antisocial behaviour problems or issues that arise in our communities through conversations, through people leading the work, doing the work, de-escalating the conflict before it happens. That's what happens when you respect Aboriginal voices. That's what happens when Aboriginal people are respected to lead and to design the pathway forward. I was in another one of my amazing communities a couple of weeks ago, Yingiya, and Yingiya, again, has had some unrest of recent times, but I met with the leadership group and they sat me down and they said, Japananga, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to approach it. And we're going to ask all the Karia, all the white fellas, you don't come to this part of the community today, we are going to lead it our way. And that's the best way. That's the Aboriginal way in an Aboriginal community, respecting the Aboriginal leadership. If we need a Karia, we'll bring a Karia in. And the Karias are good. They're good in our community. That's good. That's the position we need to get in. But we need to be providing these opportunities because we also need to be growing the next generation when it comes to governance structures. We need to be bringing people in. We need programs to help facilitate, to grow the next generation of leadership in our communities. Because when all my grandfathers and my uncles and my fathers have passed away, the next generations, my cousins, need to come up and they need to feel empowered to lead as well, to have the ability to make those decisions. Madam Speaker, I'm going to seek Standing Order 43, an extension of time while I'm on my feet, if I may.
Is leave granted?
Thank you, Madam.
Leave is granted.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And look, I mean, I can talk about this all night. I'm passionate about it. I'm a proud black fella. I have seen local decision-making work. And when it works is when it is left alone by interference and when it is resourced properly by all three levels of government: local government, territory government and federal government. And when organisations back local decision-making as well. That's where we see the Territory moving forward. That's where we build the strength in our communities. And I do want to say, Madam Speaker, lots of things that the member for Barkly talks about, I don't disagree with. The things that the member for Mulka talks about, absolutely I don't disagree with. I've been out on his country. I've been with him talking to elders, and I think we absolutely owe it to all of the Aboriginal people across the Northern Territory to come forward in a manner that does show people that there is Somewhere here, there is the ability for us to come together and have a bipartisan approach to elevating and listening to Aboriginal people's voices. That's what we need to do here in the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker, is to do that. Because the common theme is we'll all talk about how do we get our people to have a greater say? How do we get our people to be involved in things? Well, you've got to have good policies in place. You've got to have things that resonate with the hearts and minds of people in the Territory. If we want our democracy to be strong, then we need our remote communities to believe that they have a bright future and that they are part of the bright future. And also, when we talk about Aboriginal decision-making, the future of the Northern Territory's economic prosperity depends on Aboriginal people being involved in the participatory workforce. Aboriginal people have to be involved in that growth. We need Aboriginal people in the workforce. We need to work with Aboriginal people because 43% of the Northern Territory's land mass is Aboriginal land. We need to work with them on what that future looks like. We need to listen to them. We need to be guided by their decisions. We need to respect the land councils, the Allendiliaqua, the Tiwi, the Northern Land Council and the mighty Central Land Council. We need to listen to their leadership, their delegates, who absolutely want to see the Territory move ahead. They absolutely want to see Aboriginal people lifted out of poverty. They want country to be cared for. They want their kids to be cared for. They want good houses, Madam Speaker. These are all things that, again, we need to do. I grew up as a small snotty-nosed kid running around with my aunties at Land Council meetings, at ATSIC meetings, at bloody Aboriginal organisation meetings, at kitchen cabinets when we were talking about who was going to get rolled from what board, Madam Speaker. And I am still hearing the same conversations 30 years later. They are still the same conversations. We cannot allow that to happen for the next 30 years. We absolutely have to come up with something different. And I am hopeful that this Parliament can do that. I think when we have people like the member for Mulka standing up and standing strong, when we have the member for Arafura, the member for Daly, the member for Arnhem, all Aboriginal people absolutely talking, representing their communities, when other Bush members from this Parliament do the same, and we can absolutely be comfortable that we are elevating those voices, we are respecting those voices, that's when real change happens, Madam Speaker. And I want to make the point tonight, I think it's really important that local decision-making means supporting families. I want to just pick up, the member for Port Darwin had in The Australian recently a puff piece about Aboriginal kids. I wasn't sure if it was her trying to secure up her interstate support base for a leadership challenge or not. But I want to make the point clear. Aboriginal families love their kids more than anyone else. They love their kids as much as everyone in this Parliament loves their kids. The child placement principle is not to be used as an excuse to say that people don't care or don't love their kids. Do more to encourage kinship care. Do not be a disgrace, and do not use culture to justify removing an Aboriginal kid from a loving family, because that's disgusting. Do more to invest in kinship care so that our kids can be placed with their kin. There are so many people out there who are ready to take up that challenge. Let's work together to make sure that Aboriginal kids can stay with Aboriginal families so that they know who they are, they know who their family is, they know where they come from. Any assertion that an Aboriginal kid is being abused because of culture is untrue, is disgraceful, and is pure politicking with an Aboriginal child's life. And if you have an issue with it, then actually get out on the ground and talk with Aboriginal families and make sure you understand. But Aboriginal culture should never be used as an excuse, because I'll tell you right now, there are aspects of our culture that you may see as brutal. There are aspects of our culture, such as how we work together or how people may process the grief of another one. But there is not a single aspect of our culture that absolutely says that domestic violence is part of Aboriginal culture, because it's not. Child abuse is nowhere part of Aboriginal culture. And the own failings of this, if you read the Australian article put forward by the member for Port Darwin, she's highlighting her own failures are in the Northern Territory Government Department. She says that in her own article. So do better. Reform that system. The child protection system across the country, Madam Speaker, is broken everywhere. There's not a single child protection system in this country that is working. So bring it all together. Bring the aunties, bring the nanas, the mums, the dads, the granddads, and work on that. The child placement principles are absolutely crucial to an Aboriginal child's safety and well-being, and they should absolutely be fundamental. I want to make the point before anyone jumps and interjects and says that I have said something. The safety of a kid, black or white, is paramount and always should be. No one is denying that. No one is denying that. The safety is absolutely paramount of a child. But there is no excuse. There is no excuse. There are so many loving Aboriginal families that I have met across the Northern Territory, whether I'm related through them through kin or not, that are ready to be kinship carers. They want to. And if they were asked, they would step up to the challenge and do it. The safety is paramount. And yes, when a child is removed, for whatever reason, I'm not going to disclose that, that is of nature, that is confidential, but when an Aboriginal child is removed, they have to come into the department, they have to go into the assessment, the intake team, but that's when they can be sourced and they can be found to go into a placement with an Aboriginal family so that they can maintain those practices. I also want to acknowledge that in some cases that can't happen. I acknowledge that. I'm not stupid. They absolutely will then look at foster care, and a shout out to all of the foster carers across the Northern Territory who do a great job. But I will finish, Madam Speaker, by saying I have travelled the Northern Territory far and wide. I have been to the most remote places of the Territory. I have been to places of this great Territory that members of this Parliament will never get to in their entire life. And in every corner of the Northern Territory, in every remote community, I have seen places where there is so much love, so much respect, so much culture, and I will absolutely stand up in this Parliament till the day that I am not here and stand up for Aboriginal people who don't have a voice sometimes in this government to make sure that that is heard. Because we cannot continue to demonise Aboriginal people. Because as the member for Mulka said, we are not all the same. The top end is different to the south. The east is different to the west. But the common theme against every four corner of the Northern Territory is love, language, law. We need to respect that, Madam Speaker, and we need to embrace it. Because if you want a territory that is inclusive, if you want a territory that respects one another, then we need to embed and respect those practices. That's how we'll actually get change, is when we do that. When we look at our remote communities, we actually should come up with a gold star standard. Communities that are of a certain population should have a certain level of infrastructure. When you look at places like Yingiya or you look at Maningrida or whatever, they should have bakeries, hairdressers, butcher shops. They should have all of this. So let's work together to make sure that they can have this. Let's lobby the Commonwealth to say, let's create a baseline of what these communities should have, because that's how you do it. We have to restore hope. Every time something happens, people's hope is being taken away, and we need to restore that. Listening to those voices. Stop coming in the top, we know how to do better. And I'm not saying it's one side, I'm saying all sides are guilty of doing that sometimes. Let's pause, let's stop, let's reflect. Let's not do that. Let's come in and let's say, how can we do that together? I think that the best way to do that is to absolutely say, no more decisions about us or without us. Let's create bush parliaments, front doors for remote communities, regional assemblies. Anyone goes to a community, you have to meet that group. You have to get a clearance, an ID card to go to that community, to say that you have cultural competence, to say that you are safe to be in that community around small children, to say that you are respectful. These are all things that we should be doing if we're actually saying what we want and we're doing what we want. That's what we need to be doing.
Thank you. Honourable members, I'd like to acknowledge in the gallery Lichfield Councillor Chris Sevatories. Welcome to Parliament House on behalf of honourable members. I had 3 members draw your presence to my attention, Chris, so you're obviously a popular guest. Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before turning to the substance of this motion, I want to acknowledge and thank the member for Mulca for bringing it to this House. As all of you know, the member for Mulca has worked tirelessly in this chamber for more than 9 years. He comes here as an Aboriginal elder, leader, senior lawman with deep knowledge of Aboriginal law. And over again, with integrity, with patience and with grace, he extends a genuine invitation to work alongside him and the people he represents across parties, across perspectives, because he understands that this work is bigger than politics. This motion reflects that approach, and I thank him for it. Many of the people in this chamber talk about respecting the member for Mulca, and I know that the member for Mulca values that, but true respect comes also in listening deeply to what he's saying and acting on it. I rise to support this motion because it goes to the heart of one of the Northern Territory's longest-standing failures, the persistent gap between decisions made about Aboriginal people and decisions made with Aboriginal people. For decades, governments of all persuasions have spoken about consultation, engagement and partnership. Yet too often what Aboriginal communities experience is something very different: policies designed elsewhere, timelines imposed from above, and decisions finalised before communities have had any opportunity to shape them. The result is not just frustration or distrust, the result is policy failure. We see it in housing programs that do not match family structures. We see it in youth justice responses that ignore kinship obligations and community authority. We see it in education, in health, in child protection, in local government and community authority. In alcohol policies or in land use, in economic development, again and again, well-resourced, well-intentioned government interventions fail because they are not grounded in Aboriginal law, in Aboriginal governance or in lived reality. Madam Speaker, this motion is clear and deliberate. It calls for genuine partnerships and shared decision-making, not symbolic consultation, not advisory bodies with no power, not hand-picked voices that suit government convenience. Genuine partnership means shared authority. It means Aboriginal people having a real say and real power over decisions that affect their lives, their families and their lands. The member for Mulca's motion recognises that such partnerships cannot exist without legitimate community authorised governance structures. If government wants to share decisions, it must know who it is sharing them with, and those representatives must be chosen and authorised by their own communities, not appointed or endorsed by government. Across the Territory, Aboriginal communities, of course, we all know this, are not homogenous. They're made up of multiple clans, language groups and extended family networks, each with distinct roles, distinct responsibilities and distinct authority under Aboriginal law. Yet far too often government engagement collapses this complexity into a single voice, a single organisation or a single meeting, or even a single conversation sometimes, sidelining some groups while elevating others and creating division where none previously existed. This is not respectful engagement and it's not effective governance, and all of us have seen the problems that this causes. This motion rightly states that the work must begin by supporting the development of community groups that represent all clan and family groups within a community and have authority to make decisions in accordance with Aboriginal law. Community governance doesn't emerge on demand. It's not a tap that you turn on. It requires time, trust, resources and recognition. Many communities want to strengthen their decision-making structures but lack the stable funding, the resourcing, the administrative support and the long-term commitment needed to do so. So if government is serious about partnership, it must be willing to invest up front, not just in service delivery, but in governance itself. And this includes funding for community-led processes to determine representation, decision-making rules, dispute resolution mechanisms, and allow accountability back to community members. It also includes respecting that these processes may not align neatly with electoral cycles or departmental reporting frameworks. Madam Speaker, shared decision-making also requires government to relinquish some control. It requires departments to accept that community decisions may not always align with pre-existing policy preferences, that Aboriginal law and authority must be treated as legitimate, not as cultural input to be weighed and go in or out, but as a governing framework to be respected. And Madam Speaker, this is not a radical proposition, it's practical, it's what works. We talk constantly in this place about the problems, about youth crime, about family violence, about community safety, about child protection failures. We commission inquiries, we debate legislation, we tighten laws, and yet we keep doing things the same old way, the failed way, over and over again. We centralise power, we take authority away from communities, we sideline Aboriginal decision-making, and then, when outcomes do not improve, we express frustration and place blame on the very people whose power we've taken away. That approach does not make sense and it does not work. What works is sharing authority with the people who actually hold it. This motion is consistent with international human rights standards, including the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which affirms the right of Indigenous peoples to participate in decision-making in matters that affect their rights through representatives chosen by themselves. It's also consistent with the hard-earned lessons of territory history. Programs imposed without consent fail. Decisions made without authority do not hold. Policies delivered without trust do not endure. We've heard in this chamber about law and justice today, well, many days, but today in relation to this issue. And this is an area where the consequences of failed decision-making are felt extremely acutely and where genuine partnerships matter most. Across the Northern Territory, Aboriginal people have consistently called for properly resourced community-led law and justice groups, and we've heard both from the member for Guyula and the member for Berkeley about the importance of this today, and I was very grateful to hear the member for Berkeley's clear commitment to Aboriginal self-determination. So that was really good to hear in the chamber today. Community-led law and justice groups are groups grounded in clan authority, family responsibility and Aboriginal law. They're not governance models designed for administrative convenience. And when these structures are ignored or sidelined, the results are entirely predictable. Courts cycle the same families through the system. Police are asked to manage harm that should have been addressed far earlier through community authority, through peacemaking and mediation. Children are criminalised where early intervention, cultural accountability and local decision-making could have prevented escalation. And when community law and justice structures are respected and supported, the outcomes are different. I also want to follow on from what the member for Guyula said, that this is not about every Aboriginal community I've worked with, and I have a long background in working around law and justice with Aboriginal communities, is absolutely fundamentally committed to the safety of their children. And any implication that that's not true is deeply harmful and deeply inappropriate and takes us nowhere towards the future that we all want to build. We do not need to speculate about whether supporting community law and justice structures works. We have evidence here in the Northern Territory. On Groot Island, the Yingiya community's law and justice arrangements demonstrate what's possible when government recognises legitimate authority rather than bypassing or overriding it. Decisions are grounded in kinship, responsibility is shared, disputes are resolved earlier, and accountability is meaningful because it's culturally legitimate. These groups do far more than gammon advice to government. They resolve conflict, they guide responses to offending, they support victims, they strengthen families, they keep children safe, and they hold people to account under Aboriginal law in ways the mainstream system cannot replicate. Yet law and justice groups are under-resourced, consulted too late, or stripped of real decision-making power. And then government points to poor outcomes and asks why nothing is changing, while continuing to repeat the same centralised top-down approach. I've also been lucky enough to be involved with the amazing Maorom project for many years, an incredible and a unique intercultural program, a partnership over the years with the Durali Clan Nation and other Yolngu leaders, Charles Darwin University, the Australian Defence, the Australian Federal Police, the Northern Territory Police, judges and judicial officers, senior government officials and many others from across Australia. This unit program, led by the Dr. Reverend Yingiya Mark, who we sadly lost 2 years ago, provides a model for how Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal institutions can work together to create meaningful and effective change, respecting authority and law in both worlds. So we do not need to look far to see what works. Madam Speaker, it does not make sense to keep doing the same keep doing things the same old way, the failed way, and then complain when it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense to remove authority from communities, to centralise power in Darwin and then blame Aboriginal people for the consequences of decisions that they did not make. The solutions aren't hidden, they're right in front of us. This motion gives Parliament a clear direction. It says that if we want different outcomes, we have to work differently. We must invest in community governance. We must recognise Aboriginal law, and we must share decision-making power with the people who live with the consequences of the policies and the laws that we make in this chamber. Genuine partnership is not a risk. It's the only evidence-based path to safer communities, better justice outcomes and lasting change. And genuine partnership is not slower government, it's smarter government. Shared decision-making is not a risk to authority, it's a foundation for legitimacy. So this motion doesn't ask the government to step back, it asks the government to step with communities, to recognise Aboriginal law, to respect community authority and to build governance structures that can sustain real long-term change. Madam Speaker, Territorians are rightly demanding better outcomes in safety, in health, in education, in housing and in justice. But better outcomes will not be achieved by repeating the same failed top-down approaches and expecting different results. So if we're serious about closing gaps, about rebuilding trust and about creating policies that actually work, then this work cannot be optional and it cannot be delayed. It's time for government to move beyond rhetoric and begin the work of genuine partnership on every issue that affects Aboriginal people and in every community across the Northern Territory. And it's time to stop repeating failures, to stop blaming communities whose authority has been stripped away and start doing what we know works. Madam Speaker, I commend the motion to the House.
Are there any other speakers? Member for Arafura. Sorry, just had a brain fog.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak in support of this motion that the member for Mulka has brought to the House. The member for Mulka has been in this place for 9 years, as he outlined today. And he's come from a traditional background into the Westminster system to try and get a shared approach on how to fix issues with Aboriginal people. He is one of the only few that's been here for more than a decade in this place, and he's putting out an olive branch, basically. I mean, he's probably speak a couple of languages, and he's come from a different cultural setting to try and work the Westminster system so that he can get some scores on the board, some leeway in regards to shared decision-making, because he understands and he sees that Aboriginal people need to be at the table in the decision-making process. Madam Speaker, the Labor opposition will always support self-determination for Aboriginal peoples, because we know that when Aboriginal people take ownership of issues, of their own affairs, better outcomes come. Now, there's a lot of obstacles and a lot of blockages in the way, and that's in regards to poverty, overcrowding in their communities, and they still balance it. They come to community meetings, they participate while they've got an overcrowding environment that they've come from. That's why school attendance in some remote communities is low. It's because that social life that's definitely, mostly affecting them. We believe that for the Northern Territory to reach its full potential, a strong growing economy with plenty of jobs for local and remote people must happen. When both parents or one parent is in a job, the child will have better leadership, have someone to look up to, and will get up and participate, go to school or go and get a job himself. Reducing the number of Territorians going through the judiciary system is also a key thing to be discussed, but community members are not involved with this. We're making laws for Indigenous people without Indigenous people at the table. We want our healthcare system to look at catering for Aboriginal people and Aboriginal people having a say. Because when someone is flown in, an elder, flown in, it's a full circle moment where and it frustrates me. The elder is flown in and the family, because of cultural obligations, are required to be in close proximity. This is why I believe that some of these places in the suburbs where they come and support, we've got people that spill out into the long grass, become itinerant because they're here and they can't stay at that complex that the lady or the person with chronic illness is at. So you'll have more than 10 to 20 family members come and try and be with that elder, because historically it's always a one-way trip sometimes for family members, for elders to come and they come back and it's a funeral. That's why a lot of people come in and be there to support the elders. It's a cultural obligation. This can be a discussion that each community is different. So, the healthcare system, if we have our services on the ground, we want people to stay in their communities and have access to everything. I mean, I've heard the Indigenous Affairs Minister say that. So it keeps people out of regional centres that get in trouble and spill out to the car parks, spill out to the parks around some of the, I've got a house in Palmerston, a family one, and I go and visit it every now and then. And I feel for the lads, especially when it rains, because all them buildings are filled, underneath, from people actually hiding, from the rain, getting out of the rain. We all know Aboriginal Territorians are overrepresented in mostly every aspect: health, judiciary. So get us to the table, no matter if it's disagreement, right? Anything. It'll create an understanding of where we stand, and even if it's a disagreement, at least that knowledge is passed on to them, that information, and they go back, and then you come back with a different approach. That's communication. That's how we should do it. Madam Speaker, I want to make the correction about the perception that comes to mind when we hear that Aboriginal... Madam Speaker, I want to make correction about a perception that comes to mind when they hear Aboriginal people need support. Support isn't just about funding. Support is a holistic wraparound approach. Like I said, you can throw all the money you want at programs, at communities, but if they don't have ownership over it and they haven't been a part of the discussion, there's no point of them participating. They'll participate to a certain point, and what we want to get is we want people to change their mentality. It's an endless cycle that we're just throwing money at. The most important component from the government and people that want to get Aboriginal people involved is listening. It's listening to them and understanding that Aboriginal people have a different aspect, have a different angle on life. Listening to the experiences being shared and making decisions with those individuals, these communities want change and outcomes. Like I said, member for Mulka, he comes from a different environment, a different cultural structure, and he's coming here and he wants to work with this, Balanda system and try and get his ideas shared with UMOP. I heard a couple of speeches initially when we first started Parliament a couple of, 16 months ago about itinerants being in footpaths, being, sleeping rough in complexes. Guys, pull up, have a chat, ask them where they come from, encourage them to go back home. Why are they here? Find those little key hints of why they're here. And the majority of the time, they'll say, we're here because our family member came for health reasons, or one of our sons is in for jail, or he's going through courts. We don't know, Just ask those questions and then get a better understanding and encourage them to move on. Like I want to see a safer Darwin, like my kids go to school here. My sister catch the bus, the Palmerston Depot. I don't know if you went out there, but, go and pick her up from the bus depot. I want her to be safe, So we just pull up and have a chat. Pull up and have a chat, and what they'll say to you is they'll give you hints, and then we can bring it back and say, look, how can we talk about this as a collective? As members of Parliament, as leaders and public facing figures, we need to take each scenario differently because everyone has a different story. The government must listen to the history of the person, because we've come from different communities and there's reasoning behind it, so you need to hear the whole story. That's why the old man keeps talking about history, talking about culture, because he's come from a point, he's here now, and he wants to follow through. We had, when I first started a couple of years ago, local decision making in Maningrida occurred. It had the regional council, it had the land council, it had all these different orgs, the main orgs and boards in the community, all participating in what the community is moving forward and towards. And out of that, they made a women's cultural hub because the women in the community needed somewhere to go and needed a point where they get access to services. Go through the courts, children's services, even Centrelink, fixing their Centrelink and identification in the community. So, and the other one that was the Namlaya group that I always talk about here, where they've created a judiciary board that sits alongside the judge in determining the case for the child. So that's amazing, like you've got different aspects of the children's life being represented in that courtroom. That way that kid can talk about his culture, his obstacles, English second language, third language, fourth language, need to do a foundation course to elevate him to get a job. That can be discussed there. We've trying to tackle the $4 billion, we've tried to tackle the remote housing issue as well, because we believe that coming from a safe household, not overcrowded, will definitely play a lot into getting people, active in the community and contributing. People want to work, people want to get money, but if you've got, over 20 people in the household and 2 people working, that's the issue, and that's where poverty comes from, overcrowding. All that is occurring in my electorate, and I'm happy, and I'm glad, I'm so think that the CLP government is continuing that work in regards to housing. That's very important. A couple of other local decision-making boards that were created was Monty UP. Monty UP is from the Tiwi Islands, but and they've from that they've created they're doing oysters. They're trying to create their own business and economy, and just Namalaya Law and Justice, I spoke about that. Gunbalanya Law and Justice Group as well. It's all helping towards reducing crime and keeping people like youths in communities instead of coming into town and wreaking havoc. We all want that. We want that to stop. Real impact changes happening out in remote regions that we have asked the remote communities and we've assisted, and I just want the government to start listening to Aboriginal communities so that we can come to a decision together or get some information, no matter if it's, like I said before, it doesn't have, there's no agreement, you don't have to agree on things, but just know where each other stand and then negotiate from there and then pick a point that everyone agrees to. I mean, I spoke to different industries. I've spoken to AFANT, and I've spoken to the Seafood Council, Seafood Council, over 80% of the waterways is Aboriginal, the Blue Mud Bay thing. And I said, look, the decision, and I said, are there Aboriginal people on your having a chat with you on your boards, And they're like, oh, that's a different way to look at it. Doesn't matter if it's a disagreement, as long as somebody is there to take that story back, and then that discussion can happen amongst themselves. Then they'll come back with a different angle. Anyway, hopefully, so listen to truth-telling and make decision-making together is the key to action, and they are needed to ensure everyone in the territory have a good social, economic prosperity in all our regions, all our remote communities, and I commend this bill to the House, or this motion.
Are there any other speakers? In closing, Member for Johnston. Oh no, Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the motion brought to the House by the member for Mulka in terms of shared decision making, and this is something our Labor team has been very proud, not just in our opposition days, but of course when we were formerly in government, and the history, in fact, of the Great Australian Labor Party, Madam Speaker, in supporting Aboriginal decisions and Aboriginal land rights and communities and partnerships, leading solutions for issues and problems and challenges to make sure that people have a seat at the decision-making table, Madam Speaker. We've been a party who's been very proud to do that over many, many decades, so we continue that legacy here now in the Northern Territory Parliament. And the member for Mulka's motion, Madam Speaker, does talk to the heart of what we believe and value in our principles, which is making sure that decision-making that affects Aboriginal Territorians and Aboriginal communities is made in partnership with Aboriginal Territorians and Aboriginal communities. Some of the proud work that we did formerly in government, Mr Deputy Speaker, was the local decision-making policy, a policy that was created based on all of the work, feedback and learnings whilst Labor was in opposition, to present that to voters and to be able to create real change. When we hear the CLP government talk about, we want to see tangible things and practical outcomes. That's what local decision-making was about. It was about handing back decision-making and supporting decision-making back to communities, homelands, regions, so the impact of what happens for Aboriginal Territorians is in the hands of Aboriginal Territorians and decided in the hearts and minds of Aboriginal Territorians and supported by government, most importantly, Mr Deputy Speaker. Some of that work I was proud to lead formally in some of my various ministerial roles as a former Labor minister, and particularly some of the work that has still managed to survive the CLP government since they've come to power in August 2024. So I commend particularly those leaders, many of them elders, Mr Deputy Speaker, in my electorate of Arnhem, for the work that they have done, not just over short periods of time, but some of them many decades of advocacy, many decades working in the space of local decision making, but actually channeling all of that work, effort and legacy and experience into real changes for their community for the better. So a lot of the work that I have been able to support and champion as the member for Arnhem, as the local member for some of our communities who are still fortunate to be able to hold on to their local decision-making agreements until they expire. We know that the member for Barkly, as the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, has no appetite whatsoever in supporting any extension of those local decision-making agreements. I believe that is a true mistake that is being made, a lack of commitment, a lack of care and a lack of respect by the CLP government when it comes to those strong voices of the decision makers in communities, decision makers in regions who want to see some real change for the better. And I think it's a real cop-out, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the CLP has not committed to extending and continuing that work just because Labor started it. I think that's really petty, and the thing that really annoys me about that, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that this is a process that people were championing for decades, and the member for Guyula said it really well. Sometimes people don't get it right when they're in government, but we've got to learn some of the mistakes of the past to make sure they're not repeated in the future. And I think that the opportunity for the CLP to rise above their pettiness when it comes to not supporting decision-making by Aboriginal Territorians and Aboriginal communities has completely been lost because their ego, they can't see over the big heads of their ego to make sure they're actually seeing, listening and learning from the leaders and the traditional owners who have led this work for some of them, many of their own lifetimes in their professional careers. And some of them have retired and still working to improve their community. So hats off to them for trying to survive the unfortunate political cycles of the system that we're in. But I learnt very early on as a local member in my electorate in one of the community consultations around local decision making, Mr Deputy Speaker, that decision making and leadership in the Western sense changes. People change roles, they change titles, they change jobs and positions, but in Aboriginal culture, the leadership doesn't change. The responsibility doesn't change, and that accountability for community decisions and family decisions and obligations around family does not change. And to see that written up after a whole week-long consultation with community members in a particular part of my electorate of Arnhem was actually so eye-opening in that sense. It's a concept that I know and I've grown up with, but to see the difference around the many hats that different organisations and government carry, but it is so true. Leadership and decisions change all the time in the Western system. They don't change because leadership in the Aboriginal cultural way doesn't change. You don't shirk your responsibility just because of a job title. You don't change your responsibility as a family member because of your job title. It stays with you regardless. So I thought that was such a stark contrast, but a really important one to acknowledge, which was from one of the communities in my electorate. Mr Deputy Speaker, the motion from the member for Mulka around partnerships, I think, is important. That's something I know he's spoken about in this place for over 9 years, is partnerships. Again, some of the work that I'm proud to have championed in the Arnhem electorate, and some of the agreements that are still underway or had been worked on for a few iterations, include closest to my home. I live in Katherine, so the Jawan Association Aboriginal Corporation covers the communities of Barunga, Woogala, Manyaluk and the Jawan homelands. The signing off of the local decision-making agreement in 2018 to implement a 10-year local decision-making plan, and they focused on, and they are still focused on, Mr Deputy Speaker, culture, people, country and housing, and some of the areas around jobs and training, as well as community control and for Jawan people around transition of services for community services, as well as the preservation of culture and country. Some of the work that was led by Jawan, I always say, Mr Deputy Speaker, that in particular the welcoming spirit of the Jawan people has been something that I have been so fortunate to experience as a local member, but the history and the strength of the Jawan people, when we look at the Jawan Nipmuc handback over 30 years ago, Jawan people, there was a lot of horrible mistruths and to be honest, Mr Deputy Speaker, a lot of racism back in that day around the handback, I should say, the handback of Nipmuc Gorge and Jawan country to the Jawan people. There was a lot of scaremongering. There was, unfortunately, rights for whites that came very strong and hard, and I heard it was a very horrible time for that region around race and division in the Northern Territory. But the Jawan people said they were going to continue to share that country, and they have so, Mr Deputy Speaker, for decades on. They're award-winning, multi-gold plate tourism award winners, Mr Deputy Speaker, with all the amazing work they've done. A 5-star Cicada Lodge on country, offering up jobs opportunity and cultural and tourism experiences at that high level, to the great infrastructure and campground upgrades right across from the lodge, and the way that Jawan have continued to strengthen opportunities for their people. So adding a local decision-making agreement really did do just that, just add value to what was already the strength for Jawan. So again, an area that I'm very proud as local member to represent, but the work they do and have done, not just recently, but for many, many decades, continues to be a strong driver in that part of the Arnhem electorate. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Bargala Traditional Owners decision-making agreement was signed in 2022, and that covers specifically the two communities of Barunga and Woogala communities in my electorate of Arnhem again. And the key focus for this agreement, Mr Deputy Speaker, was around a Law, Cultural and Justice Committee. Thankfully, the work of the traditional owners in driving that desire for justice to be done in a better way. We heard from the member for Arafura, a fantastic example of Namalaya in his electorate of Arafura based in Managrita and servicing the homelands, communities and families. Bugala TOs also had that drive to have the justice delivered and served better, stronger, with more positive outcomes for the Bugala people in that region of Barunga and Woogala. The other name for Woogala is Beswick, Mr Deputy Speaker, in case people are unfamiliar. So that the LDM that was signed, I did write to the Attorney-General asking for a briefing on what the latest work for Bugala was. There's been some concerns that there may be some stalling or some issues around supporting the Bugala Law and Justice Committee, but got a very sort of wishy-washy response and still no offer for a briefing, unfortunately, by the Attorney-General and her department. So I'll continue to pursue that again this year, Mr Deputy Speaker. Let's hope they've got some more information, or maybe they've gone out there and got the information, but let's hope they don't drop the ball in supporting those local-led solutions when it comes to improving justice outcomes here in the Northern Territory. And I get to understand the priorities under the Attorney-General, who I believe has still not visited a single Law and Justice Committee. There's only 6 in the Territory, 72 Aboriginal communities in the Territory, and I think it's quite appalling, to be honest, that the Attorney-General of the Northern Territory hasn't bothered to meet with or sit down with one of the 6 law and justice groups of the Northern Territory. Mr Deputy Speaker, moving on to the Werribee Aboriginal Corporation Local Decision Making Agreement. That beautiful little homeland, Werribee, is based just on the opposite side of Nipmuc National Park to the Nipmuc Gorge. Lovely little homeland. They had some key objectives. They still have these key objectives: economic development, health and community wellbeing, infrastructure, housing, culture and heritage. I understand that there's some bit of scattered support here and there for those objectives, but I will make it my commitment for this year to make sure that the work that hasn't been done does get done, and that the people of Werribee do not feel like they've been left behind again. That agreement should definitely be the driving force and the guiding principle of how to improve that homeland for the better. And again, some focus on better living quality and services, but also job opportunities. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Yingiya Development Aboriginal Corporation was historically the very first local decision-making agreement signed in the Northern Territory, and I was fortunate to be there, and of course as local member, extremely proud, but also as a family member to many of the people in the Nooka community and the surrounding homelands of that area. Some of the work has been led to really focus on outcomes within the large community of Nooka, but particularly focused on service delivery when it comes to government services. They have a mutual respect agreement with the Northern Territory Police Force. I know that there's going to be some extra work done on that this year. I look forward to supporting that as local member, and the Yingiya board members and community members and traditional owners. So making sure that some of those outcomes are continued to be delivered on. And it was so interesting because that one involved all tiers as well of government, Mr Deputy Speaker. So I look forward to continuing my support for the community in that. The Numbareni Development Aboriginal Corporation in Numbulwar community, Mr Deputy Speaker, was signed in 2024. Some of their key objectives are around cultural governance and social wellbeing, community development, enterprise, economic enterprise, and local jobs for local people. I think that one's probably another one that I've been very proud as local member, but obviously an extremely special one for me. That's the community where my mum's originally from, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's also the community that I taught in. So I have some very keen interest on a personal level as much as a professional level as the local member. The Numbareni Development Corp, Aboriginal Corp, have really grown from strength to strength, and acknowledge and thank the Yingiya Development Aboriginal Corporation over in Nooka. They spent a lot of time supporting and mentoring Numbareni Development Aboriginal Corporation for their work and some shared resources, just shared skills and learning, so Numbareni mob didn't have to do it all on their own and start from scratch. And some exciting news for them. In 2024, that applied for the land tenure over the old clinic site. And which was pretty phenomenal for a new organisation. And they're in the process of creating new accommodation options there. So sort of like a little motel, which is amazing. Like, you know, I've been alive 40 years, nearly 41 years, and I've grown up in and out of that community my whole life with my family, and to see some real catalysts around economic opportunity for Numbulwar. It's definitely one of the most isolated communities in the Northern Territory, Mr Deputy Speaker. Unfortunately, more isolated now that the CLP has cut the funding for the Phelp River Bridge, something that I will continue to advocate for as long as I'm alive, to be honest, not just in this job. Numbulwar is now cut off from the rest of the Northern Territory for about 3 to 5 months, depending on how big or small the wet season is, Mr Deputy Speaker, but I'll continue to voice my advocacy around that, and so will the people of Numbulwar, but also Nooka and Yurapunga, because there's a lot of movement between families in that region. But unfortunately, no one can drive in or out because there's no bridge covering the Phelp, no high-level bridge covering the Phelp. Mr Deputy Speaker, I mentioned Yurapunga, that's the smaller community not far from Nooka, on the other side of the roper. So they actually get caught, well they used to, not anymore, not as much anymore, between the Wilton Bridge, the Wilton River and the Roper River. Now there's two big bridges on that, both sides, so it's very rare for them to be cut off for longer than a few days or a week at max because of those two high-level bridges. Makes a huge difference when you invest in infrastructure in the bush, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it improves the living conditions and safety on roads. But in terms of Yurapunga, they worked on economic development, health, cultural and community wellbeing, infrastructure and assets, organisation, governance and sustainability. And one of the really amazing stories around Yurapunga is every single house in Yurapunga was completely knocked down and rebuilt because some of those houses were pretty shitty little tin houses, and very proudly under the remote housing work that the former Labor government led, every single house was replaced, was rebuilt, and some new extra housing stock was also put in place in that small, beautiful little community of Yurapunga. But they've got some great stories. The Yurapunga Aboriginal Corporation, it's had its ups and downs, but they are now doing very steady, Mr Deputy Speaker, and they run an amazing op shop through their community, and it provides opportunity for jobs. But they've got some great economic micro businesses and ideas to rebuild. So I continue to look at supporting whatever I can in that great part of the Arnhem electorate. Also, some other community local decision making.
Order, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Yes.
Request an extension of time.
Is extension granted? Leave is granted.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Member for Daly. It's perfectly timed because I do have quite a few other local decision-making agreements that I would like to give a shout-out to in the electorate of Arnhem. The Groote Island Archipelago Local Decision-Making Agreement, Mr Deputy Speaker. Groote Island and Bickett Island in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Beautiful part of the Northern Territory. Most people would know Groote Island is one of the biggest economic drivers of the Northern Territory with the magnesium mine out there. It is one of the richest islands in Australia, and a lot going on there, but a lot of opportunity around their 5 pillars: housing, health, the economy, law and justice, and education and local government. So we've seen some of those changes of recent, Mr Deputy Speaker, and the processes and perseverance for the Anandiliakwa people. The local decision-making agreement on behalf of Groote Island and Bickett Island was signed by the Anandiliakwa Land Council, the ALC. They put in a significant amount of resources and funding for each of the 5 pillars that were driven by the desires and aspirations of the Anandiliakwa families and community members and people living in and out of the region. Another area, and I must say, Mr Deputy Speaker, that I've been proud to champion as local member, but also as one special to my heart, when my grandmother is an Anandiliakwa woman from Groote and Bickett, so to be able to see again a place that I'm very familiar with, from being a young person, a child, for growing up now to an adult and a professional, and somebody who now gets to very fortunately and humbly and privilegedly represent my family members in the Northern Territory Parliament here as the member for Arnhem. That LDM was signed in November 2028, and I was fortunate to be there for the signing. I got to witness the Chief Minister who signed it, and a whole bunch of work that then started. Mr Member for Barclay, you love Groote?
Sorry, can we direct comments through the chair,
yeah,
please?
thank you. It was signed in 2018. Maybe I may have got a bit excited. It was a 10-year agreement. Maybe I had both dates. So thank you, Member for Barclay.
No, you got the right date.
Signed in 2018, and it should go till 2028. So just enough time if the Member for Barclay, as the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, would like to extend. If not, that's okay, because there's another election in August 2028, Mr Deputy Speaker, so we might get a chance to sign it off as a future Labor government. Mr Deputy Speaker, the work of the Anandiliakwa families, particularly around education in that part of the territory, is quite impressive. All of the young people on Groote and Bickerton speak Anandiliakwa as their first language. They may speak Creole or Yonomata or English, other languages after that, but they've never had a bilingual education program. So one of the key areas that were identified by community members, by family members, by service providers, was to create and resource Anandiliakwa language resources for an official bilingual program on Groote and Bickerton Islands. So it kind of really struck me because across the water, when we go to Numbua, on my grandfather's side, our students there speak Creole as their first language. Wuboy, Anandiliakwa, Yonomate English, speak Creole as their first language. So Numbua is a revitalisation language school, school with a language program. So it was quite interesting for me to see that Groote, whilst all our young people there speak Anandiliakwa, that there was no bilingual program officially in place there. So they've done a lot of work in doing that, and they also had a big vision around having a boarding school for primary students on Bickerton Island, and that's a lot of cost to build on any island, let alone the smaller island off the bigger island. But the ALC and the family members have been working for quite a few years to get that off the ground, so I'll continue again to support that initiative. And then, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Jalkaripunyu Blue Mud Bay LDM, that covers Baniala, Gungun and Wandawoy. So that's in a beautiful part of the Northern Territory, the Blue Mud Bay area, an area the member for Mulka is very familiar with, not just because he used to be the local member for that area when before the boundaries changed, but also a lot of strong family ties and direct family members for the member for Mulka. And our electorates sort of shifted a bit. Mine moved north, and the member for Mulka's electorate boundary moved a bit south. But we have a lot of crossover in that region, not just with family members and community members, but also those cultural ties and songland ties that go all the way out to Groote Island as well. So very proud to be able to now, since August 2024, represent that area and see some of the really strong economic drive that the family members and community members in that Blue Mud Bay LDM region have driven. Just for example, Baniala is got a huge amount of work around an art centre, community or homeland art centre, and the partnership there at Baniala with the Australian Navy, Mr Deputy Speaker, is so impressive. So if anyone wants to see how we can really truly work together around two-way learning at that really high level, the cultural and professional adult level, please, or you can talk to me, but please, if you get an opportunity to visit, understand, listen, learn about the partnership they have there, and I think the member for Mulka and his electorate also has some other projects in and around Nirkala in his electorate that are partnerships with the Australian Navy. So it's so interesting. But also people may be aware the landmark High Court decision, the Blue Mud Bay decision, was forged by the advocacy of people in that region, from that community, that homeland, that area, and fought for many years. And I think this year's the 18th year. Yeah, 18. 18-year anniversary this year since that High Court decision. So it is a special place because it changed law of the country, Mr Deputy Speaker. It changed Australian law from the advocacy of the people from that region. So another layer, another step. Some of the key objectives from that Blue Mud Bay local decision-making agreement: transition service delivery to local control, focus on employment and economic development. That encapsulates the Arts Centre that I mentioned, Mr Deputy Speaker. Strengthen local governance and improve telecommunications and essential services. Pretty hard to do business when you're in a community or a homeland and you don't have Wi-Fi or signal reception or stable reception. So places that are very remote are really advocating strongly now, Mr Deputy Speaker, to ensure that they have connectivity. They have not just survival connectivity, but connectivity that will create economic opportunity, doing business, people being able to book accommodation, cultural tours, having the opportunity to share land and country and to be able to provide a partnership and an experience and to be able to create those local jobs. So a lot of work happening there in the homelands as well, Mr Deputy Speaker. So there are, of course, other local decision-making agreements in the Northern Territory. I really believe that the focus for the member for Mulga around shared decision-making with Aboriginal communities has to continue to be a focus of every government here in the Northern Territory. We don't hear a lot from the CLP when it comes to supporting true local decision-making, the shared decision-making, which the motion goes to, is around making sure families, clans, community groups have that autonomy on every facet that affects their lives, just like everyone in this chamber should and I hope has the opportunity to control and to make decisions about every part of our lives here. We should expect that each member should also support, advocate for, fight for, essentially, the ability for every Territorian to have that same decision-making. And in the communities and homelands, we know a lot of that decision-making is shared amongst families, amongst clan groups, and the expectation it should be shared with government services and non-government organisations is also a respectful way to move forward together. So I commend the member for Mulga for this very important motion today. I thank him for the opportunity to provide some insight to some of the things that are working well or not working well in my electorate of Arnhem, but that bigger picture, and particularly to place on the record our Labor team's very strong commitment to shared decision-making, local decision-making, not just now, Mr Deputy Speaker, but into the future, so we can see that positive impact for all Territorians and making sure that Aboriginal Territorians are not left behind. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Are there any other speakers? Member for Daly.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I too rise to speak on this important motion being put before the House by the member for Mulga, Mr Guyula. And firstly, I do want to thank him for putting this forward. This is a very important topic that we all should be speaking about from the crossbench side, the opposition and the government side, but it is disappointing that we have only seen one member, rightfully so, should be speaking about it, in the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Steve Edgington, speak about it. I'm very, very surprised that there are members on the government side that have yet to get up and speak on this very, very important motion. The member for Namatjira represents a Bush electorate, and I'm sure his constituents would like to see or like to hear what his position is around shared decision-making with Aboriginal people and Aboriginal communities, because it is a very important topic that I would have thought he would be speaking to represent the communities of his electorate. So, Member for Mulga, thank you again for bringing this forward, recognising the urgent need for government to begin the work of creating genuine partnership and shared decision-making with all Aboriginal communities on all issues that affect Aboriginal people. This work must begin by providing support for the development of community groups that represent all clan and family groups within a community and have authority to make decisions for the people of the community in accordance with Aboriginal law. And I couldn't agree more, Member for Mulca. What you said earlier, that you've been here for 9 years now, and we have seen over time systematic failures from all governments from both sides come to terms with how we have that shared decision-making with Aboriginal people. And I think the member for Barclay spoke about that earlier around policy changes when governments come into power. And unfortunately, what we see is that if it's the government that come into power and it's not their policy, they'll usually scrap it. And we see these huge changes in policies and when it directly impacts Aboriginal people. And then what we then see on the ground is that impact that we are seeing now out in communities, because there is no consistency with policy for Aboriginal people. It chops, it changes, people are getting confused. I see it firsthand out in Wadair. I see it firsthand in Pepperminardi. I see it firsthand in Palumpa. I see it firsthand for Aboriginal people in Darwin, the Larrakia people. But I think we have to come at this with a bit of humility and understand that when we make those chops and changes because it might not sit with our government's priorities of that time, that it actually has an ongoing impact for Aboriginal people. Because there isn't any consistency within the policy for Aboriginal people to actually get things established and well placed within their communities. And an example of that is around the local decision-making agreements, which I know there are some communities that it needs strengthening. I can completely agree to that. But there are many, many, many communities, especially the communities that I represent, and an example of that is out at Emu Point with their local decision-making agreement, where they're very, very proud of that shared decision-making and that local decision-making agreement between the Northern Territory Government and the Murruruong Aboriginal Corporation in Emu Point. Because they have put in a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort to put forward their priorities to government and their aspirations to government, and then formulated that into a document so it's clearly set out how Aboriginal corporations, in this case the Murruruong Aboriginal Corporation and the Northern Territory Government, can work together. And that took a lot of time and effort. And I can speak to that because I was the local member when it was first signed off and implemented. And it initially started from a community cabinet. For those that don't know what community cabinet is, it is when all the ministers, they were going to head out to Wadair. And a few people along the Port Keats Road, communities along the Port Keats Road, some of the homelands, Palumpa, Pepperminardi, Daly River, said to me, well, why is it always Wadair? Which is still important, I understand that. So I suggested to the Cabinet of the time, well, let's go to Wadair and let's actually drive up the road. Let's drive up the Port Keats Road and actually go in to the homelands and have all the ministers there. And I know the member for Guadja, Chancey Paik, was there for those meetings. We met with Aboriginal corporations in Wadair, but then we went along the road and we stopped in at Palumpa. We heard some of those issues and concerns from their communities and their aspirations in what they wanted to do and the future for their community and what they wanted to see. So we developed an LDM agreement for them. We then went up to, which is one of the proudest LDM agreements that I've been a part of with the government, was we stopped into Emu Point. And I'll never forget it. It was a very powerful moment. The whole community showed up. We were all jam-packed into the creche at Emu Point, and there was a young, she probably would have been about 15 or 16 years old, and Terry Sams, who's the senior traditional owner out there, asked his granddaughter to actually get up and speak to all the ministers and the chief ministers on their aspirations of what they wanted. And it was very, very powerful. I'll never forget it. That we had a young traditional owner, 16 years old, she'd get up and put forward what the community wanted. And that's leadership coming from the elders of that community, looking at their young people and saying, we want you to speak to the ministers on what our priorities are. And showing to our young people that don't be afraid to speak to your elected members. Do not be afraid to speak to us, because that is our job. And I think sometimes you see members of parliament come in here and think they sit above other people, and that's not right. And I'm not suggesting anyone in here, but I think we do see that time to time in politics, and we should reflect on that, because we are no better than the person next to us. And what came out of that meeting, Mr Deputy Speaker, was some of those commitments. So she put forward those commitments. And I remember being there, and she said, we haven't seen upgrades to housing since I've been alive. So they hadn't had any upgrades to housing since the early 90s, I later found out. So what do we do? I remember the member for Gwadja was the Minister for Housing at the time. They literally walked us around to each house to show us the deterioration of each house of those homelands. And it was just from repairs and maintenance. I remember looking at one of the bathrooms, and there was a leak in where the shower was. It was leaking down through the wall, which created a massive hole in the floorboards and in the wall. Now, that was done because no one had actually gone there to repair their houses, even though they're paying rent, but no one had gone there to upgrade those houses. So what did we get? We got an agreement in place that we would upgrade every single house in that homeland, which has been done. Tick. The community, we're happy with that, that every house had been upgraded. What we did next was went around and found out how many people actually are in this community and looked at the overcrowding and identified that we roughly needed about 4 new houses for Emu Point. So just recently, actually this year, those 4 new houses have been complete, and they were handed over to the community of that time for 4 new families to actually move into that house. So what does that mean? It means that people have a house that is livable, that is safe, ensures that their kids can get to school. We see great school attendance out at Emu Point, which I've spoken about many times before in this chamber. It gives people dignity. It means people are proud of their community, but it also means that people are able to stay on their traditional homelands, their traditional lands. And I heard the member for Mulca talk about cultural genocide that's happening up here in the Northern Territory, and I can touch on that in terms of a practical example, because when we don't fund homelands, it means that people cannot stay on their homelands. So they have to either move to Darwin or a larger community such as Wadair, which is not their traditional homeland, which means that people are no longer speaking their or practicing their traditional language. They are no longer then able to practice their traditional cultures and ceremonies. So over time, that is then lost. And we lose those languages and the practice of ceremony. So when we're not investing in homelands, that is what A practical way of looking at it is when we're looking at a cultural genocide, when governments are not actually investing in homelands. When we see the issues in Darwin, it is because we are not investing in our homelands. I see many, many people from the Thamara region in Darwin, and they tell me that they do not want to live in Wadair, so they need to come to Darwin and live. And they cannot go back to their homelands because of the infrastructure has been depleted so badly. It has been run down, it has been completely abandoned from all levels of government. I'm not here to sit here and blame the CLP government. I understand that this is a systematic issue that has been going on for decades and decades and decades, and there is responsibility from all sides, from the federal government down to the Northern Territory government to local government, but we all need to come together to collaborate and actually come to an agreement for those long-term plans that are in place, because at the end of the day, it's actually impacting our people. It's impacting Aboriginal people. And then what we see is this punitive debate that goes on in here and blaming Aboriginal people for what's going on, rather than actually looking at some of the underlying issues that I've just spoken about there. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, again, I've always said it here, I'm happy to take people out to Emu Point or any homeland or any community to actually physically see what's going on and get it, and go in with an open mind and just have an understanding of where people are coming from and what they actually want for their community. Because we can make a difference, and I'm seeing that difference in Emu Point. I'm seeing some differences in other homelands, but I'm also seeing some homelands going backwards. A lot of homelands going backwards, actually. Mr. Deputy Speaker, so through that, we looked, so there's housing that I talked about, so the upgrade to the housing, some of those 4 new houses. We also looked at education, which was a huge, huge priority for the community of Emu Point, and especially to Terry Sams, the traditional owner there, who advocates heavily that everyone needs a good education, but he understands the foundation of having a good home to ensure that people are able to get to school. So we've, in that LDM agreement, there was constructing additional educational facilities. Some of that has been done. There's been some upgrades to the playground out there, there was an extra building put out there because the teacher was actually living next to the classroom. So it means that we can get a full-time teacher out there that's not driving in and out now, that there's accommodation for the teacher. That means we've got consistency with the schooling out in Emu Point. So we're not seeing teachers come and go because they don't have accommodation to stay at. Before they were staying at Pepperminardi and they're having to drive in and out, which is about 30-40 minutes away, but during the wet season that drive can extend further out, and if there's enough rain you can't get in and out. Establishing a school council, so we saw a new school council set up with many of Terry's sisters that sit on that school council, and that's guiding the way how the school could operate. And giving advice and working hand in hand with the Northern Territory Department of Education and the community to look at how best we can run educational programs out in Emu Point. But this agreement is due to expire this year. As I've mentioned many times in this parliament, I haven't heard anything from the Aboriginal Affairs Minister, but I know, speaking to people of Emu Point, that they are very, very eager to extend this agreement and look at how the government, Northern Territory government, can continue to support this agreement and take away the actual politics of it, because it is important that we have local jobs out there, and one of those things was establishing a ranger service, looking at a recreational hall to provide space for the youth. The other important thing was about sustainable use of water and clean water and access to water. out there. We know many of our communities out there are water stressed, so we're ensuring, working with Power and Water, that how we ensure that we have reliable, safe drinking water for those communities as well. So going back to some of these priorities and what I was speaking about earlier, when the Community Cabinet went out there, and I'm sure the Leader of the Opposition, Selena Yubo, remembers heading out to Emu Point with all those ministers. We then later put that and packaged it all together. I then had the opportunity to go out to Emu Point in 2022 and actually sign the first LDM agreement out there. And I went out there with Nicole Mannison, and then later out there with Selena Yubo, the Aboriginal Affairs Minister, to look at that signing, the implementation of those agreed aspirations that were in the local decision-making agreement. So, Madam Speaker, with that, we've now seen that enacted, and some of those implementations actually happen over a period of time. But when we also look at shared decision-making, we know that there's many LDM agreements across the Northern Territory. We did commit to treaty back in 2016. We know that's, and the way I look at treaty is that this was establishing a first step to treaty. It's about transitioning community control back to Aboriginal people, community services back to Aboriginal people, which makes us all accountable on both sides when we do that, and also ensuring that Aboriginal people have control over their affairs on their community. We talked about the LDM agreements that were in place. We've seen many other LDM agreements. I mean, I was another similar story was down at Daly River, where we'd been working with the Green River Aboriginal Corporation to look at some transitioning some of that community control over to the Green River Aboriginal Corporation, and Dr. Miriam Rose is the chairperson of the corporation out there, who I meet with regularly. And just while I'm on talking about Daly River, a huge shout out to them, and I've been thinking of you. I've spoken to a few people down at Daly River. I know that you're coming in.
Point of order, member for Arafura.
Standing out of 43, I request a time extension for the member for Daly.
Is leave granted? All those in favour say aye. Leave is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the government members for yelling out yes enthusiastically. Thank the member for Kazarana. I don't think it was a no, I think it was a yes. But I do, just my thoughts are with the people of Daly River at this time. We know that we've seen the flooding upgraded to potentially look that may flood at Daly River, and it's a very stressful time for people down in Daly River. To evacuate and leave your home and leave your possessions and everything that you know, it can be quite stressful not knowing then what you're going to come back to when it floods. I mean, I've seen photos of in the 90s, if you go down to the Daly River Inn, of old floods. It can be up at the level of the roofs there. We've seen photos of crocodiles literally swimming through the community there once it floods, because the river does run alongside parallel. But I do want to thank the emergency services who are down there working around the clock to ensure that we get people from Daly River back into Darwin, into that shelter here. And, I will acknowledge the Chief Minister. She did call me to give me an update, and I appreciate that, because it is important as a local member to know that and put the politics aside. So I do appreciate the phone call to give me an update on where the emergency service are at. But and it does align to this in terms of shared decision making. It shows that we can work together in times of need. We are seeing the emergency services down there working with the community. They understand very well how that river works, especially when it is flooding at this time, and there's been plenty of rain around. So I do want to thank the emergency services, the Green River Aboriginal Corporation, the community members down there for working with the authorities to ensure that everyone's safe and that we can get everyone out of the community and into Darwin to ensure that they're safe. And then, obviously this is an ongoing matter that we'll have to monitor, the emergency services will monitor, and hopefully we can actually, well, firstly, hopefully it doesn't flood. But secondly, if it does, go down there and see, what or if any damage has been done to people's houses, but more broadly the community, the service providers that are there too. Many of the service providers are in the community, so thank you to those emergency services. But again, Madam Speaker, I do want to thank the member for Mulca for bringing this on. It's such an important debate that we all should be having respectfully. The timing is perfect. The start of the new year, we should be talking about shared decision making. We need to ensure that we're all working together because Aboriginal people know what's best for Aboriginal people and their communities. If we pretend otherwise, well, then we're all failing in this role. We know for our communities what's best for us, and I know we need to be at all levels of government working together to ensure that we have those long-term plans in place and that we don't chop and change between policies, especially when policies are working. That's the most frustrating thing that I see, is that when we see a policy working, a new government comes in, either side, and they change it. They change it because it's, that wasn't our policy, that wasn't our idea, so I'm just going to change it. And then, people become disheartened, they become disengaged within the system. But we do need some sort of reckoning in terms of consistency between all parties and how we do that, and ensuring that we're listening to Aboriginal people in communities. So, Madam Speaker, again, I thank the member for Mulca for bringing this forward. It's such an important issue that we should be speaking on. But I will leave my remarks there. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any other speakers? In closing, the member for Mulca.
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And first of all, I'd like to want to thank everyone who participated today, and we shared our thoughts together to see how we can work together and support one another in every way which way we can. It's confusion. So I want to particularly thank what member for the places like Goja, Johnston, and include into this line of those who made some speeches and spoke, and as well as member for Berkeley, and standing up there, and I believe we can understand each other. It's a simple story. I want to know where I come from and why I said that it's not working for me and my people in here, because we come from different culture, language, and the way how we serve one another, what we thought, and that's, we want to make it clear. We're looking at brokenness in culture or how system works. That doesn't work that won't work, because we can see from our understanding. We think we know this is what is best for you, and it's about learning that there are multilingual cultures, and and how we live from Northeast Arnhem Land, like in Yirkala to Milingimbi to Elko, there's about 24 or 30 cultures like that. It's multilingual languages, but as it comes further on south, or west, or south to these people, it changes, but the connections through language, the song lines, through ancestral creation that move through connects, but they start to speak different languages. And that's where we are been trying to tell, like I said, it doesn't matter who was in the chamber that is running the government then. It's not about that. It's the system that we need to come closer. I've come closer here, and we expect you to come closer to us and find out. The only way we can create a pathway then sort it out, oh, this is how it works. This is how it works. Okay? Make sure you discipline your children and teach them education, and all the way from young children, the way you've done it for many thousands years in our country. And same with, sorry about this, but I will say, like you've come from overseas, not a clan country, but we still need to learn one another. The only way we can learn one another is to come together and share one another. So it's not problem if I say, okay, I'll serve you to how you best work on your country, with your children. And when it comes to disciplining children, respect with children, it's about our cultures start from young children when they are growing up, participate in ceremonies, they learn language. One clan learn language, and they walk together. And when they grow up to be older child, boy or a girl, they go and participate in discipline ceremonies. They go through paintings that puts them talk to discipline. The elders are talking to you. Don't do this. You don't do that. You don't do this, that, and the other. And so they carry on. And we've carried on. I've been through that ceremony, Pongol, and this is how we go. That's how we go, and this, I believe, but that's just me, that's how we don't understand each other. It's not saying, not that I am bad, or not that you have a bad system. It's that it works differently, and all I need to do is come and sit down, take my clan, and we'll sit down and learn one another. Round the top end of the Northern Territory, there are ceremonies. There are ceremonies that run, and a lot of people looked at it when they came, and there's a lot of people there. What kind of culture is that? Is that kind of actually discipline people? It's that about creating pathway for people to work, or what is it? Is it a bad culture? What is it? And we can always come and say, we've always done this. Remember Fugoja and Daly River, like Daly, and others like Barkley, Tableland, and all those areas. When we call a clan group from there could be 2 or 3 clan groups there. I'll tell you a bit of a joke or a fun, not fun joke, what I really learned when I was in New York and in Washington, D.C. And I saw there's a The Union Jack that was sent here into Australia, they were made up of 3 different crosses from different countries. So that's what I'm trying to say. They come from different countries and with their own way, and they joined up and made a strength of people that can come here. And this is what we do. When we go get people from down south towards Barkly Tablelands, the centre, the Daly, the East Arnhem, around here, and we come together, we kind of meet sovereign, that we work together and sit down together. But the way we do it is sit down diplomatically together. We've never really had nothing like a triangle where someone is higher than everybody else. Every different clan groups. We've done that in trying to create a pathway. Well, not trying to create a pathway, but working together that this is how we run it. This is how we discipline our children, the young people. And now we've been confused with lots of people misunderstanding each other, and then to my understanding and the people in the indigenous people that will understand, there's a fight that's going on across the top end. Young people, they are confused, and the parents, the family are confused because we're not having any opportunity of coming together so that we can sit down and work together. But we'll help you, support you, do it your way, and we'll support you, you do it your way. And that way we can come together into joint ventures and work together. So that's how long I got time, still 10 minutes, haven't I? Sorry, but no?
You have to finish by 7 to put the motion.
7, yeah.
So you can, if you want to put the motion.
I'm just going, and this is the point that I'm starting to work. But I want to tell everybody, no culture, our culture, whether it's down this way westwards, down towards southwest, Barkly Tableland, Centre, Alice Springs, up Northern Territory, up this way East Arnhem Land, is not a bad, no, that is the law and governance that we have lived on, and we come and learn one another. So we come and support one another, and in that is always education, discipline, showing leadership role, showing how to stand as strong leaders, to see a stranger, people coming from another clan over this way, we go and meet them and then bring them over and we sort things out rather than thinking, they're coming to cause trouble and arguing, this sort of things. So I have said mainly about my disappointment for the last 9 years. This is actually 10 years now. It's 2016 to 2026. Yeah. But it was really something, a challenge, that when I walked in, I just didn't know what was going on. I feel I am a bit different. They could be different over there. They could be different. But how do I find it? Now, after 10 years, 9 years, 10 years, I've started to grow strong in my spirit, and it's saying, that's who they are, and that's who they are. And vice versa, I was expecting for the parties, other parties, or even independents here, and the other people from coming, come and let's sit down diplomatically together in a Mulka space. My electorate is a Mulka, named Mulka, which is a, a space that we sit down together, not one another. I'm going to tell you this, that, and the other, and don't you overcome me. Now, let's listen to one another. Let's share how we can run this community. Let's share how we can go and meet and learn about one another. Young people will grow, they season after season, and the age grow. When they young children, like in a kindergarten, and then the young boys and young girls, and other people that actually needs to learn, and we keep discipline strong that way, through that culture. That's where we need to learn one another, teach one another, educate one another, and support one another. Thank you.
Move that the motion be put?
Sorry?
Do
Yep.
you want to move that the motion? So
If you like. I know.
The question is that the motion be
Yeah,
agreed to.
yeah.
Those of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.